Ideally, letting an employer know about workplace discrimination would be all that was needed to ensure the problems were promptly addressed. In practice, it's quite a bit more complicated. When I worked as an EEOC investigator, I met thousands of people who complained about discrimination. For some, their complaints led to prompt relief. Others experienced retaliation. Making an internal complaint is a delicate process, much like walking a tightrope. Except at the end, even if you navigate it perfectly, your employer might still shove you down. In this video, I'll walk you through when and how to make an internal complaint, what steps you can take to improve your chances of success, and how to respond to loaded questions in an internal investigation. When you believe you have experienced employment discrimination and are trying to decide whether to complain, what factors should you consider? The greatest motivation for complaining is that all your problems could be resolved very quickly. The biggest reason not to complain is retaliation. Retaliation is quite common. A complaint might lead to worse treatment, hinder your progress within the company, or result in your termination. All these actions are illegal, but as you've already experienced discrimination once, perhaps at the hand of management, a repeat performance is a distinct possibility. Another consideration is the significance of the discrimination. If the adverse action is relatively minor, you may decide the chance for a remedy is not worth the hassle associated with complaining. The strength of your evidence also comes into play. You're unlikely to succeed without strong evidence. However, your employer's reaction to your internal complaint will likely be less influenced by your evidence than it should. Consider how likely your employer is to respond favorably to your complaint. This depends chiefly on who is more essential to the company, you or the person who discriminated against you. An employer is more likely to take appropriate action against a low-level employee with a history of employment problems than a vice president. Try to find others who have previously complained and ask how their complaints were received. If you suspect that you're being set up to be terminated, a protected complaint could cause the decision-maker to reconsider. If not, and they subject you to a baseless adverse action after your complaint, your case for retaliation could be stronger than the issue you originally complained about. The sad reality is the discrimination you've experienced will not be addressed if you do not make a complaint. Also, you will likely experience the discrimination again in another form. A decision maker with a bias against you is likely to continue to stymie your attempts towards advancement or force you out. Attempting to outlast a discriminating decision maker rarely works. Another compelling reason to complain is an ethical one. A discriminator will repeat their reprehensible behavior until someone takes a stand against them. Regardless of whether you decide to make a complaint or not, once you have experienced discrimination, start looking for another job. Just in case your situation continues to deteriorate, it's good to have a plan B. Remember, this video is not legal advice. For that, you need to speak with a lawyer about the specifics of your situation. Speak with the decision maker responsible for the adverse action first. Make this attempt particularly if the decision maker is your immediate supervisor. The decision maker is unlikely to reverse their decision. Yet, by taking a complaint over the decision maker's head from the start, you sacrifice the chance to resolve this quickly and easily. You are also demonstrating you're a team player who wants to work out your differences through the chain of command. Now, if you don't trust the decision maker or think your relationship with them cannot be salvaged, you might decide to skip this conversation and escalate your complaint. I'll discuss how to do that shortly. If so, consider how you will respond when asked if you discussed your concerns with the decision maker. At the very least, you might try to have a conversation with the decision maker immediately before your appointment with whoever you escalated your complaint to. When you complain about an adverse action, you want to emphasize the importance of the issue to you without setting off alarm bells for the decision maker. Calmly and professionally inform the decision maker how uncomfortable and unsatisfied you are. Tell the decision maker how important this issue is for you. Explain how vital their decision is to your career, professional development, or continued employment. A manager will feel threatened by a complaint of discrimination and will vigorously defend their actions. Avoid putting them on the defensive. But if you think it will help, you can raise the ante. Mention that the person who received more favorable treatment is not of your race, age, sex, or other protected class. That will underscore the seriousness of this conversation. They are much more likely to respond positively if they like you and your approach in the conversation. Compliment them. Appeal to their sense of authority. You're the only one that can help me. If appropriate, assure them that their decision in this situation will not set a precedent. Give it your best shot and see what happens. If they say they'll get back to you, ask by when. Pin them down. If they say by the end of next week, confirm it by saying, okay, Friday the 20th then. Wrap up the conversation by stating your appreciation for their listening to your concerns. The decision maker may offer you a compromise. You almost certainly will not receive everything you want. Nevertheless, every compromise is worth considering. Because escalating your complaint carries uncertainty and risk, and internal complaints are likely to achieve only small results at best. Rearrangement of staff, transfers, and written or verbal reprimands are the most likely positive outcomes of internal complaints. Receiving money is very rare. You will not be informed whether a decision maker is reprimanded, and rarely will a decision maker be terminated as a result of an internal complaint. But if the decision maker doesn't get back to you or fails to offer you any reasonable compromise, you can escalate your complaint. Immediately before or immediately after you complain to a higher authority, send a written communication to the decision maker that documents your conversation. Without seeming threatening, state that there was a discriminatory basis for the decision. I think it was unfair that a less experienced man was given this assignment over me. I believed I was denied this assignment because I am a woman. Indicate that you intend to pursue this matter further. Now that you have stated that your unfair treatment was because of your protected class, you have made a protected complaint. This document will be important in the event that you later need to prove retaliation. At this point, be sure to keep a copy of that complaint, any response you receive, and all other evidence in a safe place. Documents you're allowed to take home should be kept at home. If events spiral out of your control, you won't be allowed to take copies of documents from your office or printouts from your work computer. If your immediate supervisor is completely removed from the situation, discussing your complaint with them is prudent. Send them a note confirming your conversation, a precautionary measure against retaliation. Something like, "Thanks for your understanding about my disability discrimination complaint against Tim. I really appreciate your support. I'll let you know what happens." Hopefully, they will advocate for you. An advocate is extremely helpful when escalating an internal complaint. The advocate could be a member of management, a union representative, or a coworker familiar with the internal complaint process. An advocate can plead your case, provide a sounding board, and strengthen your credibility. The best person to complain to is whoever will have a sympathetic ear for your complaint. Larger companies have a human resources director or personnel director. An equal employment opportunity officer or affirmative action officer is even better. You can also complain up the chain of command or jump to a higher ranked management official if you think they will help. You may have to complain to several people before you find someone who you believe will do something about your complaint. Large employers typically use formal processes to resolve discrimination complaints, such as an investigation, peer review, arbitration, and external mediation. For an arbitration or mediation proceeding, you will need a lawyer or other advocate. I'll discuss these processes in a future video. The most common approach is that the employer will designate a company rep to conduct an internal investigation. This company rep will likely attempt to negotiate a solution that will satisfy upper management, the decision maker, and you. The potential conflicts of interest in this arrangement are not hard to see. No matter how neutral, impartial, and empathetic the company rep appointed to handle your complaint appears, they are still working for the company. Their job is well defined: to resolve complaints in the manner best for the employer. For discrimination caused by a member of management, your case must be quite convincing. Managers are representatives of the employer, placed by employers into positions of trust and responsibility. From the employer's perspective, employees frequently complain about management. If your evidence is ambiguous or only leans in your favor, the firm will throw their weight behind the manager. For decision makers in powerful positions within the company or who have friends in powerful positions, the evidence must be even more substantial to have a chance for consideration. Of course, some company reps desire to help employees who have been victimized by discrimination. They realize that preventing a valuable employee from becoming disgruntled and resigning is best for the company, while retaining a discriminatory decision maker can be extremely detrimental. However, the company rep will not decide on their own if your complaint is valid. They'll share the results of their investigation with their superiors, who will be predisposed to decide that it would be best for the company if your complaint of discrimination against their manager is dismissed as frivolous. If you have a good working relationship with your second-level manager, you could request a meeting about a sensitive matter. Otherwise, when escalating your complaint, you'll likely need to put it in writing. Provide a brief, less than one-page, chronology that summarizes your concerns. List the dates, times, and places where appropriate. Be professional and respectful. State a discriminatory basis for your treatment without being threatening. Conclude with a polite request to discuss the matter further and something to indicate your loyalty, like your continued desire to work effectively to benefit your employer. Persuading a company rep to assist you is difficult for the reasons previously mentioned. A company rep faced with a discrimination complaint will ask themselves 3 questions upon hearing your complaint. The 3 questions are you serious? Are you right? Do I want to help you? In trying to determine if you're serious, the company rep will explore how easily the matter can be resolved. They may try to placate you with a few soothing words of concern, discourage you from pursuing the matter further, or propose to resolve the matter by giving the decision maker a stern talking to. Once the company rep realizes you will not be so easily dissuaded, they'll ask themselves whether you will pursue your complaint externally if it's not resolved internally. Your goal is a delicate balancing act. You want to avoid putting your employer on the defensive. If you're perceived as a threat, the company will focus on defending itself against you. But you need to convince the company rep that you're serious, or risk being only offered minimal concessions, which you'd find unsatisfactory. So, you want to indicate your firm desire for a remedy to the adverse action you experienced, while simultaneously indicating your trust that your employer will take appropriate action. Bluffing is essential to being taken seriously. The company rep will act based on how serious they think you are, not how serious you actually are. Confessing to the company rep that you're not going to pursue the matter further is an invitation to having your complaint be ignored. You can expect the company rep to bluff too. Whenever a company rep says, "That's all I can do," you know they're bluffing. The question is not what the company rep can do, but what they will do. Allude vaguely to your continued dissatisfaction. "I really want to work this out, but I'm really unhappy about how I've been treated." Perhaps you're unsatisfied with what the company rep proposed, but you know that you will not take any further action. Before acquiescing to a minor concession offered by the company rep, ask, "If I agree to what you propose, what will you do if it happens again?" Just because you're telling the truth does not mean the company rep will believe you. One of your biggest hurdles is credibility. In addition to the evidence you present, the company rep will assess your credibility by how you present your evidence. Respond to questions with the same level of detail as you included in your written chronology, including times, dates, and places. Consistency between your written statement and your responses to the corporate rep's questions reinforces your credibility. Identify documents you believe would support your case, but to which you do not have access. Always remember that the company rep's job is to protect your employer, not to conduct an unbiased assessment of the facts. You want to convince them that you're right, but you want to keep some cards up your sleeve as well. The evidence you provide your employer in an internal investigation will be used by your employer to defend itself if you ever take your complaint further. You want to reveal enough for your employer to conclude you're right, and no more. If you're absolutely certain that you will not take your complaint further now or in the future, then holding back evidence becomes less important. You may not be able to avoid identifying particular witnesses when speaking with a company rep, as they may be essential to proving your case. However, recognize that if your employer has predetermined that the internal investigation will show no discrimination occurred, you will be placing your witnesses in a difficult spot by identifying them. They may be subject to retaliation if they support your contentions. If appropriate, you might suggest the company rep talk to everyone who works for the decision maker rather than identifying specific people. Alternatively, rather than naming all your witnesses, you might limit the number of witnesses you identify and avoid those who might be prime targets for retaliation. Much of the company rep's desire and ability to help you is predetermined, but certain techniques can maximize the likelihood that the company rep will want to help you. Be emotional. Show how much the discrimination hurts. Tell the company rep how many years you have worked for the company, how much you love working for the company. Seeing how you've been harmed by the discrimination may invoke sympathy in the company rep and their desire to help. Tell the company rep how committed you are to resolving your complaint. Explain how you tried to talk to the decision maker about your treatment. When the company rep proposes minimal action to resolve your complaint, reinforce your commitment to working together. I would like to resolve this matter, but I don't think your suggestion effectively addresses the concerns I mentioned. The meeting with the company rep will probably start with you explaining why you asked for the meeting. You might want to start by mentioning how much you love working for the company, how committed you are to resolving your complaint, and how appreciative you are that the company rep is meeting with you. Then you can summarize what occurred to you and why you're complaining. The company rep will probably follow up with detailed questions. As you respond to the questions, take notes about what you say. If you take your complaint outside of your employer, your notes will reflect what you actually said and not what the company rep chose to write down. You need to answer the company rep's questions carefully. Here are some of the common loaded questions and suggestions for how to respond to them. Why do you think your supervisor did this to you? Most people don't know why they were targeted for an adverse action, but saying, "I don't know," weakens your position that the adverse action was because of discrimination. Instead, approach the question from the perspective, "How could anyone know? It makes no sense," and conclude with the belief that the action was due to your protected characteristic. Honestly, I wish I could understand why Jim demoted me. I've worked extremely hard and have excellent performance reviews. I believe he demoted me because I'm in a wheelchair. Has your supervisor mentioned performance problems to you before? Almost everyone working under a discriminating manager has had their performance criticized. However, a straight-up yes answer to this question erodes your credibility. The company rep will think you had it coming. Answer honestly, but plug your achievements. My performance has been outstanding. I received a 4% raise last year. There were some minor concerns mentioned, such as providing more detail in my written work. Yet, individuals with worse performance evaluations were treated better than I was. What do you want? This is the most common question and the most difficult to field. You want the company rep to do their job, but you need to phrase this delicately. The company rep is hoping you will tell them you want little or nothing, and if you do, they'll probably agree to what you ask. If you would be satisfied simply to be reassigned away from the decision maker, then state this. Identify other areas at your employer where you could be effective and explain why. Better yet, if you're aware of other openings that interest you, mention your interest in and qualifications for those vacancies. If you desire a result more substantial than reassignment, the best way to address this question is to dodge it entirely. State, "I want you to do whatever is appropriate under the circumstances." Likely the company rep will not be so easily deflected. If you could have any result, what would you want it to be? Reflect the question back at them. If everything I say is true, what would you recommend? You're the expert. I'm sure you know better than I do. The company rep may persist to try to force you to answer this question, in which case you can punt. Can we come back to this question after you've had a chance to look into the matter? Or can I get back to you? I guess I need to get some advice. The reason to avoid this question is that your answer could divert attention from your concern. The report from the company rep to their boss might become, Sheila is accusing Mike of discrimination and she wants a promotion, instead of, Sheila is accusing Mike of discrimination in the last round of promotions. In the former statement, the focus is on you and what you want, instead of keeping the focus on your complaint. Throughout the interview by the company rep, you can reverse questions directed at you. When you're asked a loaded question or sense skepticism after responding to a question, you can always repeat the question back. Why do you think the decision maker took the adverse action against me? These questions force the company rep to look at the situation from your perspective. At the conclusion of your meeting, be nice and professional. Make a final impassioned plea for the company rep to help you. Ask when you can expect to hear back, and thank them for meeting with you and listening to your concerns. Send the company rep an email summarizing your meeting. Be sure to restate your protected complaint. Thank them again and tell them you're looking forward to hearing from them by the date they told you. After some type of investigation, the company rep will probably inform you of their decision. There's a slim chance that this will result in a positive outcome. This is more likely if you're a prized employee that your employer cannot bear to lose, but sometimes employers simply do the right thing. In all likelihood, the internal investigation will state that no discrimination occurred. The main reason that an employer conducts an internal investigation is to try to protect themselves from legal liability in case you sue them. An internal finding of discrimination does not help your employer. As you appeal your complaint to higher authorities, the potential for retaliation increases. Your initial complaint about the decision maker to a company rep could have varied results. The decision maker might back down or try to build a paper trail against you to prove to their superiors that they were right all along. After deciding to discount the discrimination you experienced in their internal investigation, the corporate rep and their superiors might decide you're disloyal or too much trouble. A savvy employer will wait 3 to 6 months before initiating retaliatory acts. When you're ready to leave your employer or are no longer employed, there are a few actions you can take to help build your case. Being forced to resign because of discrimination is termed constructive discharge. As discussed in detail in the first episode of the series, the process for proving a constructive discharge case is much more difficult than proving a discharge case. There are a few ways you can strengthen the believability of your constructive discharge case. Inform your employer that unless the conditions of your employment improve, resigning is your only reasonable option. Participate in your employer's internal grievance procedure. Time your departure to immediately follow a discriminatory act. As prevailing in a constructive discharge case is difficult, you might try to hold out until you find another job. Whether you're discharged, laid off, or forced to resign, ask for letters of recommendation from everyone who has or had supervisory responsibility over you. When requesting these letters, you can explain you need them in your search for work. These letters serve an important secondary purpose. They help establish your discrimination case. As long as you conducted yourself professionally during your departure from your employer, your managers may not suspect that you're considering taking your complaints further. You're most likely to receive a positive response when requesting a letter of recommendation due to a layoff. If you're unhappy with the results of an internal investigation, it's a good time to consider getting an attorney involved. As I'll discuss in a future video, hiring an attorney is often more affordable than you might expect. You might also consider filing a charge of discrimination with a government agency. Filing a charge puts you at greater risk of retaliation. If you think you might be interested in filing a charge of discrimination at some point, contact the EEOC or appropriate state agency immediately. It might be months before you can get an interview. Meanwhile, you can weigh your options. In the next video, I'll walk you through how to file a government complaint. Thanks for tuning in.